get by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
And the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
All right. So, Gerard Gallant is the new head coach of the... Oh, okay, that didn't happen.
Yes. Oh.
Oh, no, we're still bottom in the Western Conference. So that's not us. That's not our show. Well, we're back. Jason's back on the show. Pat's taking the day off to plan for a long road trip tomorrow, so you're stuck with us today.
Suckers.
And we've got one game to cover, and it went how we thought it would go. The Ducks taking on arguably the best team in the entire NHL, definitely the best team in the Western Conference, defending Stanley Cup champions, the St. Louis Blues. And
all-star hosts.
Yeah, all-star hosts. They got everything going on right now. They're center of the hockey universe, and it was not a great game. It really wasn't. 4-1 final scoreline probably could have been worse. This is one of those games where, I think in the last show with Pat, we talked about the Dallas game. They lost 3-0, but if you look at the underlying stats, it looked like the Ducks actually played a pretty good game, which they did. They just couldn't score, and they didn't generate enough high-quality chances. This is one of those games against the Blues where everything was bad. There was no good.
Yeah.
There was no the Blues caved the Ducks in shot attempts, the scoring chances, high danger scoring chances. Everything was in favor of St. Louis in this game. The one positive, of course, Maxime Comtois getting on the board to tie the game early, but it kind of just went downhill from there. Early news to start that game. SIlfverberg, not on the IR, but listed as a healthy scratch, just trying to get back from his upper body injury. Chase DeLeo was called up, but scratched for that game. And then Corbinian Holzer was scratched. So the lines we had going into that one were ones we're getting kind of familiar with now. Getzlaf, Henrique, and Sprong, Comtois, Lundestrom, Raquel, Steele, Jones, Kasha, and then Delorier, Shore, and Rowney. And then obviously the defense has been relatively the same for three pairings for the last while now, and John Gibson mans the net. How did you feel overall about this game if you had to sum it up in a few sentences here?
Jeez, to sum it up, I mean, it was the season personified. It just felt like it just you saw. I mean, even in the first period, there were little stretches here and there where once again you're like, oh, okay, maybe this team's got it together. They're kind of throwing some good chances in there, and then ultimately just started getting outplayed, or just plain and simple weren't good enough, or were shooting themselves in the foot. So I noticed, throughout the first period and parts of the second, they would try to enter the zone. It just seems like everyone thinks that they can pass like Getzlaf or pass like everybody else and make these nice little passes or these deft little moves, but they always seem to get picked off. They never seem to arrive on the stick correctly or at all. And anytime we try and enter the zone, it's either try and make a little pass that doesn't work, or try and make a move to beat a defender, doesn't work. Then it's dump it in, but don't really have any effort to go chase it down and get a forecheck going. So it's really frustrating to kind of watch that continually happen. It seems like one of those 4 or 5 things just happens every time we enter the zone for the most part. And I'd rather them just get in, fire it on net. Maybe the goalie, makes a save or makes a mistake. But if he makes a save, then maybe there's a face-off in the offensive zone, because right now they weren't doing anything against St. Louis in that offensive zone throughout the game.
That's kind of that the word frustrating, I think, sums up this game perfectly. And I mean, it's just one of those games where you see the gap between a championship team and a team in the middle of a rebuild, and it's going to happen. I mean, I would rather, honestly, a loss like this. And 4-1 isn't the worst score line, especially against a team as good as St. Louis. But I'd rather a game like this against a team like St. Louis than a team like LA or a team like San Jose the way they're playing this year, or Detroit or Ottawa, New Jersey. Like this is a team you expect to lose this way too, and to not have a great game against, and it doesn't hurt as bad because of that. But I think the thing that's frustrating about it is you look at some of the plays in this game and how some of these goals could have been prevented and made this game a lot closer. You look at, I think the second goal of the game was a brutal turnover from Comtois, just whiffs on the puck a few times, and I'm not sure who picked it up for the Blues, but it gets fed over to Bozak, who's got an open net and a one-timer. You look at Gibson after that, he's like, what are you guys doing? And before that, the Ducks had about 3 or 4 chances to clear the zone before it even got to Comtois.
Yeah, and it's like the puck's in the net. It's what's frustrating is we've seen how they can play when they play good, and then when they play so horrible, their execution is just so bad. You're like, how are you making it this difficult on yourself and everybody? It's like no one really wants to get the puck, or everyone's just bumping into each other, or they can't quite make that quick decision, and so everyone just seems to be bottling themselves up, and then it turns a turnover. 8 chances to try and get it out, and then like you pointed out, Gibson, I saw a couple times he actually made saves, and he's just like, all right, guys,
I'm doing my job
more if you want, but I'm over this too. And it feels like every game that kind of led up to this game was like somebody else venting their frustration. One time it was Getzlaf, one time it was Gibson, one time it was Dallas Eakins, another time it's Josh Manson talking about it. And then it doesn't seem to change.
Angry quotes lately. Bob Murray just had one the other day. And I guess, to get to this play, because we have to get to it, that you said this game sums up the Ducks season. I think this play sums up the Ducks season. Fourth goal of the game for the Blues by Ivan Barbashev. A simple dump in behind the net. Gibson takes his position close to the net, grabs the puck. Lindholm's supposed to go to the outside close to the boards to retrieve any puck, or at least not get in John Gibson's way. For some reason, Lindholm decides to come on the inside as well, runs right into John Gibson. Gibby just, I think, is dumbfounded that it even happened, because he's looking, he has enough time to kind of recover. But at that point, he's like, what the hell did you just do? Like, why are you coming on the inside? Like, this is a simple routine play. And, of course, Barbashev picks up the puck and just kind of shovels it back into an empty net. Easy nominee for worst play of the season for the Ducks. And embarrassing all around. And John Gibson at this point is like, how many more ways can you embarrass me?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll give just a small bit of leeway on Lindholm, I guess, on this one, because in my opinion, where Gibson was and where he was holding the puck, he's holding it in front of him, and then real quick, like, just drops it behind him, like a drop pass for Lindholm to go around. But the whole time before Lindholm even gets there, he's got it in front of him, and sometimes a goalie will just kind of like push it to the side, let him cut in front. You're supposed to obviously put it behind you so you can get to the net a little bit quicker. But he was kind of in a weird, not all the way right up against the net, not all the way back there. He was kind of stuck a little bit in the middle, so I could see maybe some miscommunication. But there's just, someone's got to read what's going on, and that's just, all right, well, I'm here, I come, and oh no, he's here. And it's not, there's no mental awareness of, hey, we're in the game. This is what's going on. I got to pick things up. Let me read what's happening. Do that. It's just almost going through emotions,
right? Like,
yeah,
it feels like
going through the motions.
Especially at that point in the game, it's late in the third. It's 3-1 for a team that is clearly outclassed you. We've seen the Ducks do this in multiple games this year, where they kind of check out on plays, and that leads to turnovers and giveaways and ridiculous plays like this on occasion. So, we're not going to stick too long on this game. Obviously, Ducks end up losing 4-1. They have Nashville coming up tomorrow and Carolina on the day after, and then they go on their week or 5-day break or whatever it is. So a tough way to kind of close this out. Nashville looking to turn things around, new head coach. They're trying to get back on track and make the playoffs, and obviously Carolina is literally one elite goaltender away from being one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, and they're playing some good hockey right now too. So how do you feel about these next two games coming up heading into the break? You think the Ducks can steal one? Obviously, Miller's going to get one of the games coming up here too.
Yeah, but it doesn't even matter almost at this point. I mean, you could always go like, well, Miller's really solid. He's in there, but he's not having a, particularly hot season either, just like Gibson. And I don't know if it's just too much of being run down, the mistakes, everything. I have a hard time seeing them really kind of get out of this funk unless one of those teams, and I'm going to go with the first one, Nashville, might just take them a little lightly. That's maybe my hope at this point, or if somehow they're able to victimize Carolina's lack of elite goaltending at this point. I mean, they got two slivers, but they don't have a whole lot of room for mistakes. But every now and again, Ducks seem to all of a sudden just explode with, oh yeah, this is how we need to play. But I'm not betting too much on that. I think they end this little road trip bad.
Yeah, Carolina on the back of a back-to-back, second game of a back-to-back is kind of a recipe for disaster. The way they just kind of suffocate teams already with possession. It is going to be the second of a back-to-back for Carolina as well, because they play Columbus tomorrow night. So mutual exhaustion from both teams, but it's never, when you get a team like Carolina, the way they play, they're some of the worst teams to play on that second half of the back-to-back, because you're not going to have the puck much. You're going to be chasing the game for the early half of it, and that's gonna weigh on the legs later on in the third period, as much as playing on a back-to-back already does. So I kind of agree with you there. I think Nashville tomorrow is, if you're going to pick up points, that's the game. This game you got to go in and pick up points and at least grab one or two and have some momentum going into that second game against Carolina, because they're both on the road. Like this is a tough back-to-back to be
travel in there.
Yeah, then going from Nashville, then going, Nashville's a tough building to play in always, and Carolina has become a tough building to play in over the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see how they do this. But for good news, at least for the Ducks, kind of today they obviously practiced. Derek Grant was on the ice, Nick Ritchie was on the ice, Jakob Silfverberg again on the ice. Nearing a return, maybe not for these two games, but signs are pointing that they should be back soon, which is good for the Ducks. I mean, Lindstrom has been up for at least the last 4 or 5 games now because of injury, and not that he's looked bad, but you would like to get some of these guys back in the lineup and kind of aid his development a bit and send him back down to San Diego. And obviously the way Silfverberg's been playing, it would be nice to get him back in, and even Nick Ritchie too. I mean, just to see Nick Ritchie back in, and he was playing pretty decent before going down with injury, so it's going to be nice to have some of these guys back.
Yeah, especially we can get some regulars, a little bit more of that experience, and not have to bring in so many young players that are going to tend to make mistakes. And especially, when a team that's struggling, that's kind of not, a good recipe for bringing in young players to get them, hey, we're struggling. You come in here and continue to struggle with us. I mean, that's not a good psyche. It's almost like, hey, go down there, look at Troy Terry. I mean, he's kind of coming back, but he's doing a conditioning stint down in San Diego, and he's lighting it up and looks like he's having fun. So it's kind of like you almost kind of want some of those younger players to not have that on their shoulders, that they have to watch this or be a part of that, because I don't want to say it's Edmonton-like, because Edmonton was bad for so long, but then it's like they had good talent. It was just they were introduced early on to away, and I'm just hoping that it doesn't, fester and then just kind of build on itself where everyone's like, oh no, it sucks, but it's the norm.
Yeah, it'll be nice to hopefully see these guys come back, and obviously
they need it. They definitely need Silfverberg.
Yeah, and if Troy Terry can keep playing well down there, we talked about on multiple shows so far, him getting that confidence back in the AHL like he did last year would be nice to see him hopefully come up and replicate that here. Speaking of Ritchie, Brett Ritchie on waivers from the Boston Bruins, sending him down to the AHL. Would you do it? Would you pick up Nick's brother, Brett? That's how far down the ladder he's gone. Is now we refer to him as Nick's brother, Brett Ritchie. Again, Ritchie. Fourth liner, grinder type guy, more of a grinder than Nick Ritchie is, if you can believe that. For obvious reasons, he's on waivers. Play hasn't been that great this year, but just for the reason of having the Ritchie brothers and maybe like the Hanson brothers, do you bring Brett Ritchie over if you're Bob Murray?
God know why. I mean, is he really going to add anything of value, or is he just
Is he
going to take
really
up a
gonna hurt
spot?
this team though?
Well, I mean, if you have to put him on the fourth line, and then, I mean, with Grant's nearing a return, so if Grant's back, then you got your fourth line. So what are you going to do? Put him in the third line? You're going to
How about
start
this?
taking away
Brett Ritchie or Nick Deslauriers?
Deslauriers, hands down,
Yeah,
hands down.
I think the sad thing is there's an argument for that, right? Like we ripped on Nick Deslauriers signing to begin with, but there is an argument there, and that's not a
He's
great
done well
thing
on
for
that
Brett
fourth
Ritchie.
line. He served his role. He leads the league in fighting majors, gives us some sort of tenacity, and especially with a Ritchie out, or a Nick Ritchie out. You don't want Getzlaf fighting. Other than that, we don't really have anyone else who's fighting anybody. So I mean, maybe Josh Manson here or there, Holzer if he wants to, but I mean, as far as the forward goes, and I love the way Deslauriers's played. I mean, if he scores goals, that's a bonus. But I mean, he's got energy. I don't think he's a big detriment to the team. So I wouldn't want to see him moved. So at that point, Brett Ritchie really doesn't have a spot unless he's kicking out somebody with more offensive talent. And why are you doing that other than I don't know why.
I really would like to know what kind of deal the Ritchies made with the Devil to get drafted where they got drafted. Nick Ritchie got drafted 10th overall, and Brett Ritchie went in the second round to the Dallas Stars in 2011. And both these guys are guys even in junior, like they didn't light it up. Like now to get drafted in the second round, you have to be one of the top scorers in your league usually, or at least over a point per game producer.
Different.
It's crazy how much it's changed, right? We're going back in the era. It's like 6, 7, 8 years ago where these guys who played hard, were big guys, could fight, could do it all. They were coveted. They were second round and a 10th overall pick, whereas where these guys went.
It was, yeah, because I mean, I remember actually watching that draft when the Ducks got Nick Ritchie, and they said he fits the Ducks style. He's a big power forward that has good hands. He can, I mean, they were like hoping eventually he'd get in there and he'd be there with Perry and Ritchie and Getzlaf, and that would be just a dominant power line. But then what?
That NHL ready shot, right? But it never materialized. It never happened.
It never did, and it took him, a season or two, and literally in that season or two, the NHL pretty much started to change a little bit, and then once McJesus dropped down from heaven, then the whole landscape just completely changed from that point on, and those guys got drafted high at that NHL, and now they're somewhat obsolete. They've got to change their game to get better, but you're seeing the struggle, on both ends of that, so. You gotta be fast and have that elite shot, like you said. You gotta score. Otherwise, they're not that interested anymore.
Fire Bites in our chat said Nick Ritchie got the 10th overall from the Devil, but gave up his ability to look over the age of 14.
Baby face.
He's cursed forever.
I mean, the thing it was kind of chubby, so it was like a chubby baby face, and then he kind of lost weight, but it still stayed like a baby face. It was just
the face stayed.
That baby's a little thinner than the other one.
Like Cam Fowler has a baby face too, but like Nick Ritchie's got like that chubby baby stage face that just never goes away. Like he could get down to 180 and he'd probably still have it.
It's gonna sound bad, but he's also got that look of a baby. He's like, huh?
Yeah.
Like his eyes just are glossy.
Who are we to chip a guy who's getting paid millions of dollars to play in the NHL?
I know.
Either way, maybe we see a Ritchie Grant Ritchie line. Maybe. Who knows? Probably not. But let's move on to, of course,
a Ritchie Rich line. Would you call that the Ritchie Rich line?
Yeah. We need a guy named Lionel. All right. That didn't go over well. Let's move on to, of course, more trade rumors, because we're moving in on the February trade deadline, which is still over a month away. But hey, when you're a team like this, we start talking about trade rumors early. And not so much the name of the player getting put into trade rumors, but I guess Ducks fans inserting the name into trade rumors. But the Leafs lost Morgan Rielly for 2 months. Jake Muzzin is still out. Their D pairings in their last game were Travis Dermott, Justin Hall, Rasmus Sandin, Tyson Berry, Marinson, and Cody Ceci. So if you thought the Ducks defense was bad this year, that's not great. And this is a team who's supposed to be competitive. So, of course, and I'm even looking at the comments on this already. And the first comment that comes up is John Arlotti, who I know follows us on Twitter. He says, Josh Manson has entered the chat. And there's a few of those comments in there, and his name kind of got inserted there. Did you see a fit there for Josh Manson, even with Morgan Riley and Jake Muzzin coming back? And 2, do you think that would be a move that Bob Murray would explore this year, considering that Toronto doesn't have a first-round pick, and you'd most likely get a player like Kasperi Kapanen in return?
Besides a right-handed shot, which Josh Manson is, and a offensive threat right-handed shot, the other thing the Ducks do not have in a defenseman is a nasty defenseman and a nasty defenseman in front of the net. That being said, with John, if Josh Manson went, we lose a right-handed shot defenseman. We lose some tenacity back on the D line. That's no way we're going to really compete to block things out, because Lindholm's not going to be that guy. Fowler's not going to be that guy. Brunson might, but at $4 million and only signed through next year, I don't really see that being all that awesome. That being said, I have not been happy with the way Josh Manson has played this season. We cannot seem to get back what we had when it was Lindholm and Manson working like a perfect top pairing. So at this point, I'm very open to exploring having him moved out, but we obviously weren't going to get anybody who's going to be top level or really kind of probably break on this team right now. So we're going to lose one of our top 4 defensemen, and I don't see anybody else coming in that's going to have that tenacity that we're going to lack on the D side in front of our net. So it's going to be a little rough, in my opinion, to lose him, but I don't care if we lose him, I guess.
I've softened on that stance. I'm still in the trade Jakob Silfverberg mindset, because I think that makes sense. But I've sat back and I've looked at the situation with Josh Manson and kind of, like I said, softened my stance or almost changed my mind a little bit. And, I think there is a need always for a right shot defenseman. You're selling a bit low on Josh Manson this year as well. If in terms of Toronto, I think if you're getting a player like Kasperi Kapanen back, I don't think I would do that. I think the Ducks have players like Kasperi Kapanen, or players who will turn out like Kasperi Kapanen, and Troy Terry and Sam Steele and Max Jones, of guys who will be good middle 6 players, but not elite players. And I don't think Kasperi Kapanen is going to be an elite top 6 player. And plus, like, down the road, yes, the Ducks will draft some right shot defensemen, or you could find some in free agency when you start being competitive again. But they don't have anybody else. It's Eric Goodbranson, it's Corbinian Holzer, it's Yenny Hackett-Pah, it's Chris Weidman. Like, those are the guys you have, and you need one. And you think down the road, the style that Josh Manson plays, even 30, 31, 32-year-old Josh Manson, I think, can still be an effective player if he's paired with the right guy. And honestly, I think he's the type of guy you need on the blue line when you are competitive again, even at that age. And if you don't think he is, then definitely there's merit to trade him. But I think if you bring in, let's say the Ducks draft a guy like Jamie Drysdale, and in the future you've got Fowler, Lindholm, Drysdale, and Manson, I think that is still decent enough where you can be competitive like that. And if you trade a guy like Josh Manson, the Ducks don't have anybody coming up to replace him, and then you start looking, to fill a need like that later down the road in a trade or through the draft or through free agency, and maybe you don't get a guy that could do the job like Josh Manson does.
Yeah, the next player the Ducks have that matches something of what Josh Manson does, and that's a right-handed shot and some physicality, is Holzer. I don't think anyone really wants Holzer to be a number 3, 4, 2 defenseman on our team, but he'd be thrust into that role, being a right-handed shot, a little bit, more nasty, or the Ducks are going to go real soft in their top 4 and go much more offensive. And at this point, our defense is probably, besides a dead offense, the defense is also just horrible. And so I can't expect the Ducks to promote him from within. And it's really hard to go out and get a right-handed shot defenseman and one that's going to add a little bit of grit. I mean, it's coveted at this point. So it's tough. I use the word grit, but I don't mean it that way. But I mean, just somebody who's going to really kind of push out in front of the net and really kind of defend that area. And you lose Manson. We don't have anybody that can log big minutes and do that.
In a good team, I think we kind of know, we've seen it. Josh Manson is a different player. The moment adversity strikes and he has to do a little bit more than he probably should be doing.
Starts overreaching.
It's a little bit overwhelming for him. I think he is still a great player, and he's similar to Jakob Silfverberg. He's a very good piece for a competitive team, but it just doesn't look that great right now. Yeah,
yeah. For us, from a Ducks perspective, we'd have to really get overpaid for it, and his value's not there for it. So I just can't see it really happening.
Yeah. Again, more trade rumors. Me and Pat talked about this on the last show, and the reaction was actually kind of split. And then I stupidly took this debate to Facebook, and it turned into a lopsided debate in the negative side. I posed the question, should the Ducks trade Jakob Silfverberg at the deadline? Overwhelming response was a big fat no on Facebook. Last show we had it, like I said, it was kind of split. How are your feelings about this? Because I know me and Pat kind of put our feelings out to the world on the last show. How do you feel, and where do you stand on trading Silfverberg before the deadline this year?
I mean, the dude's he's finally hitting the offensive side of things that I thought he would. I think he's growing really well with Raquel, and I think Raquel being on the contract he's sticking around for a while. Why not why not let that bloom, or at least progress into whatever it's going to move into? Although I understand the idea of, well, he's got our highest value to trade and get prospects. At some point, every time you keep getting new prospects, you keep kind of setting yourself back a little bit in the whole rebuild process. And then if someone jumps up, if we're not quite there, you go like, well, let's send that guy and we'll get more prospects or more draft picks or so. At some point, you're going to have some of those veteran players. It's not like what it was, where you needed 5 guys over the age of 30. You have 10 or so in the mid 20s to late 20s, and then some kids in the young 20s, maybe a teenager in there. Now it is much younger, but you're still going to need mid 20s, late 20s, and maybe a sprinkling of early 30 guys in there. So Silfverberg still has years to help. But when the team starts to move in that direction, and some of these other players and the younger ones like Terry and hopefully Jones and Steele start getting into their prime, he's still valuable and still going to be a little bit older, but still being able to produce. I feel I've always liked Silfverberg. I always think he's been stifled in having to play more of a defensive style, and now he's been given the reins to just be more offensive, and he's shown that he can do it, and I think he can still do it for seasons on end. So I think having him at as one of those elder statesmen, as the younger guys come into their own, and maybe some youngers, that's the right concoction for a team that might work. And I'm not so focused about how bad this season is and go, well, let's get rid of, the 26 or 27-year-old Silfverberg and just go way, way young, because now, well, who else is there? There's Getzlaf, he's aging. There's Raquel. There's Henrique, but those guys aren't going to produce the goals other than maybe Raquel of what Silfverberg's going to do. I mean, those guys are probably going to decline at some point.
Yeah, I can buy into that. I think Jakob Silfverberg is a very important piece for a competitive team. We've seen it. I mean, they with him and Kessler and Cogliano, when the Ducks were using him more on the defensive side, they were extremely valuable, and he was a huge piece of that line and the ability for the Ducks to do as well as they did. And now, obviously, given them the more offensive freedom this year, we've seen them flourish, and the goals and the points have come. But, there's a flip side to that, and Silfverberg is 29, and you have to think, Yeah, he's a bit older than you think, right? Like
Yeah, I thought he was 27 or
he'll
something.
be 30 by the beginning of next season. His birthday is on October 13th, so we're getting to that point where we're right on that tipping point on whether it's worth keeping him, and it all depends on your viewpoint on when the Ducks are going to be competitive again, right? If you think they'll be competitive in 2 to 3 years, and you think a 32, 33-year-old SIlfverberg is still going to be playing at a high enough level that the Ducks are going to be able to benefit from what he can bring to the table, then there definitely is merit to keep him around. I'm just on, and you know this, and this doesn't come as a shock to you, I'm just kind of at that point where I think, he's a player that you trade while the value is as high as it is, named to the All-Star game for the first time, on pace for 30 goals, for around 55 points this year. Like, that is a valuable player, and then you look at the defensive side of what he brings to this game, and there's some teams out there right now with injuries that are looking for this exact type of player. Pittsburgh was one I brought up, but there's a bunch of others, Boston, and teams in the Eastern Conference who Bob Murray will be more willing to send a player like Jakob Silfverberg to. Sending in conference is a bit tough. I think everything's brewing for that right trade to come in that will tip Bob Murray's hand and kind of force him to make that trade. If I had the choice, I would trade him, but only if I could get a first-round pick and a prospect. I think he can get that. I think he has the value this year to get that. I don't think the market is saturated with too many good players at the deadline like it was a couple years ago. So I think if you can get some sort of package like that, especially in a draft like this year, you got to do it. I mean, you just have to. I'm not saying sell everybody, but I think if you're going to choose somebody in this roster and make sense out of it, he has to be at the top of my list.
It's just rough trading your top goal getter, your all-star, and like, well, we're getting rid of him, and we're getting more things for later on, and then you're asking everybody else, hey, right? It's tough selling, not only in the market, but I would say for the team. I mean, that's kind of demoralizing. You take our most consistent, our best offensive threat so far this season and trade him because you're really just mortgaging for down the road. So it's like, well, why am I going to keep playing if really we're just waiting for 3 or 4 seasons down the road?
Yeah,
I mean that could be demoralizing for a team, I would think.
It definitely is, and I think a perfect quote. I was going to bring it up later, but I think it fits in now. Helen Elliott had an article for the Los Angeles Times where Bob Murray has kind of a quote that sums that up a bit and his feelings right now. He says, "It's getting to the point where I have no choice. We're getting there. I told this group first meeting of the year that they would dictate what I did about this time of year. I reminded a few of them about that a month ago. They're definitely showing me where they want me to go. They're making it loud and clear as far as I'm concerned. I didn't think we had to do a total teardown. I still do not think we do, but I may have to go a little farther with some things than I thought we had to do." If you remember back to last year, these are eerily similar. I
really try not to.
These are eerily similar to the comments that he made around the time when he traded Brandon Montour, where he talked about, we need a shake-up. I don't like how the early 20s guys, some of them, he didn't name them, but he said, I don't like how, they're transitioning and their development has gone so far and their commitment or whatever, their leadership, something along those lines. I don't remember the exact quote, but this is kind of down that similar path where he thought they were going to be better last year. They weren't, and it led him to being more drastic than he thought he had to. And here we go again. He says, they're leading me to that point where I'm going to have to do some things I thought I wasn't going to have to do. And I guarantee you at the beginning of the season, Murray had no thought of trading Jakob Silfverberg, no thought of trading, maybe a player like Raquel or Josh Manson. But I think he's getting down that road where, yes, he said not a total teardown. So we're not expecting, 3 or 4 of these guys to get offloaded. But he's getting pushed to the point where I think we could see a considerable name like a Silfverberg or a Raquel or a Cash or a Manson get moved out to kind of, not like you said, not a total teardown, but to at least move some of these guys out and move, facilitate some change.
If any of that change is going to happen, quite honestly, I would throw Kasha in as a trade. I mean, he was already looking to do that earlier, supposedly. But I mean, if he's talking about the really young kids, they're still on pace for what Raquel and Perry did when they started their careers. So it's I find it hard to sit there and kind of go like, well, we were really relying on you and we put a whole lot in your shoulder. We put a whole bunch of you in there where, we're asking you to do maybe a little bit more than you should. And you're still doing what the superstars or the leaders, are.
That's a harsh comment for those kids, right? Like that is almost directly aimed at them. You have to look at who is doing well this year. It's the guys that we expected to step up because they are better players. And Raquel, Getzlaf, SIlfverberg, Fowler, Henrique even to some extent. Like all these guys are playing better than they were last year. The only guys that aren't exceeding or excelling this year and maybe taking a step forward are the 4 kids in Steele, Comtois, Terry, and Jones. And Terry's in the AHL right now. And Andre Kasha. That's it. It's very harsh of Bob Murray to go out here and say, I thought they were going to do better, and I expected them to do better. I told them that at the beginning of the year, and here we are. They've disappointed me. Like, what kind of expectations did he have for this team? Like,
I wonder if he's really directing it at the kids, because he's also said in the beginning, he's like, I don't want to have to throw them in and make them just figure it out, or at least throw all of them in there. I'm wondering.
That's what he did.
But I know he ended up having to because of injuries. But the other thing is, I think he's looking for. And this is kind of what goes along with all the people who've been frustrated, all the veterans, your Gibson, your Eakins, is they're coming out. It's just like the compete level's not there, that the headspace isn't there, and it's like if you're not showing up and trying to play, then there's a problem there. Even if every game, just be competitive. You get to be in the NHL, that sort of deal. So it's just it's tough because without naming who it is, because I even look at the 4th line guys, they're competing, they're doing it. I feel like on the defensive side, that's where people aren't competing.
Yeah, it's just like when he says they're making it loud and clear in terms of, and you'd have to think their play. Like this team is the godlike goaltending from last year, and maybe one or two of those young guys playing, up to maybe the expectations that some people had for them, away from being close to a playoff spot right now. Even just the goaltending. If the goaltending was like .917 in save percentage instead of close to below 9, they would be a better team. They would have more wins. They'd probably have 6 to 8 more points, and it would still be a disappointing season, but they would be closer to a playoff spot than they would be to the bottom of the standings right now. So it's tough, and I feel bad in some sense for the players, for him to come out here and say, I expected so much of these guys, and they're disappointing me. I mean, it's a disappointing season, but there's no way you could have expected much more than this. I mean, we were optimistic.
I was optimistic. I was very optimistic.
Well, we all kind of you got Pat over the line to say they were a borderline playoff team. I was saying they would be in the mix for the wild card. You said that they would be in I think 2 or 3 in the Pacific Division, right? So
I was up in 3. Yeah, I thought they could sneak in.
So we were all kind of optimistic, but we acknowledged the fact that this could all go south. If the ifs didn't turn out, if the kids didn't turn it around and become, take that next step forward, which is a real possibility, and as we've seen, it's come true. And then if other things didn't happen, I think we had talked about if Raquel doesn't bounce back, if Kasha doesn't have a 20 to 30 goal season. We didn't even mention the goaltending falling off the face of the earth, but that was another if, and that happened. Like, there was so many question marks with this team that, yes, they could be a playoff team, but this is a very realistic possibility of how the season could have turned out. So I'm a bit put off on that Bob Murray is astonished that this is the way this season has gone, and that the players are forcing him to make moves he didn't think he would have had to make. Like, that's what you get when you throw 4 or 5 kids who haven't played have barely played half an NHL season into middle 6 to top 6 roles. And you say, hey, Getzlaf, hey, Henrique, SIlfverberg, you're going to carry this team. They just can't do that. A 34-year-old Ryan Getzlaf, he can't do that. SIlfverberg and Henrique are great players, but they're not going to do that for you. And Rickard Rakell, as much as I love him as a player, he's also not going to do that for you. That's just not enough pieces to kind of drag 4 or 5 kids through the mud and into a playoff spot. So I don't know what this ends up changing for Bob Murray. I don't know what he's going to do. We saw the comments recently from Elliot Friedman in 31 Thoughts that he's going to be willing to use cap space to ease other club salary issues, so he could use the LTIR space for Eves and Kessler, and the cost to other teams as young assets. So maybe that's the direction he's going to. I mean, he never really tips his hand. This is kind of the first time we've ever heard him tip his hand to what he's doing. So it is a bit interesting. But what's going to come next for Bob Murray? I mean, he's got a month and a half until the trade deadline now. Obviously, the wheels are going to be turning, and I think these next 2 games are important in terms of what he's going to do.
Yeah, I would think so. I think it's coming up to one of those benchmark times of the season, too. It's like, hey, All-Star break is coming up. We also get a little week break in here, and we got the time where we're not waiting for that next game. And it's sit down, evaluate, and then make that decision. Because I don't even think the next 2 games are going to matter all that much. Even they won. It'll be the first time they win back-to-back games since November. But if the beginning of November, and even if they did that, I think Bob Murray's mind is kind of up on who he may want to move or how he wants to proceed for the rest of the season. It's not going to be good. He's not adding pieces. It's taking it away and building a little bit more for the future. But who he's directing at is kind of up in the air. What offers he gets, but I think he's going to kind of wait, and he's at least going to wait for an overpayment or pull the gun.
He'll wait for the good deal. But I mean, I have to think if they get blown out in both these games, Bob Murray's never one to wait until the trade deadline. I believe the Montour deal was made early February with about 2 or 3 weeks until the deadline. So he's never a guy to wait too long. So we're getting into that area where, if he's going to make a deal, he's going to be looking for it. And obviously he's putting feelers out there with these comments coming public that he's looking to use the cap space to make deals. And, and as I said on the last show, if he's willing to do that, I'd also happen to think that gets coupled with him also trying to move some salary out in the same sentence, in the same breath, and maybe not the same trade, but that I think he's kind of working both angles there. So we'll have to see what he does. And kind of on that topic, to round out this trade stuff, is anybody untouchable on this team? Like we've mentioned before, and I think the obvious answer has always been John Gibson. But as for roster players right now, is anybody untouchable? Is John Gibson untouchable? Is Hampus Lindholm untouchable? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Bob Murray doesn't like to trade defensemen. So I would say there's a couple. Lindholm, I don't know. Lindholm's been a puzzle to me this season and parts of last season.
Let's just take Bob Murray's history and his thought process out of the equation. Like, just on pure, do you think there's somebody you can't trade?
Yeah. Getzlaf's untradeable.
Just for his whole, outside of just the play, everything he brings to this team?
The leadership, the dude's the only one who can make consistent passes. Yeah, he screws up every now and again, but it seems like everyone else wants to try and pass like him or thinks they can, and no one does it like him. He can control a play, he can control an attitude of a game, and he's still putting up points. He doesn't have to necessarily, you can't lead the team all the way like he has been for the last decade or so, but he's too valuable from a leadership perspective, a points perspective, and quite honestly, a fan perspective. I mean, trade Getzlaf, and there's a riot. So I think there's no way someone trades Getzlaf.
You'd have to think
so there's untouchable. And I would think Gibson is under his contract. His contract's way too nice. He's still too good.
But that adds to the value. Listen, I'm not saying you should trade them.
Other teams, whether that screws us over. I mean,
no, I get it.
The whole reason we got him, we're happy that we got him. We got an elite goalie at that price. You don't get that all the time. I mean, you hold on to that when you get it. Yeah, he might have a down season, but look at the season before where he was killing it. Was an all-star. And, you can't really blame him for this season. His technique's still fine. Everything else is really fine. It's just that the team's let him down, and, maybe a little bit of creeping in of like, I can't trust the group in front of me. And at that point, you don't trade the goalie, you trade the group in front of, a stellar goalie.
Getting a goalie is always the hardest thing to do in this league. I kind of have that mindset of finding a goalie of that level is one of the hardest things to do. Now, and this is always such a hard topic to talk about because you can't bring it up without also people thinking that you want to trade John Gibson. By saying he isn't untouchable, it kind of feels like it goes hand in hand with saying that you want to trade him, and that's not the road I'm trying to go down. I don't think the Ducks should trade John Gibson. I think he's young enough and under, like you said, mentioned the contract. He's got such a great contract that by the time the Ducks are ready to be good again, he'll be a valuable piece of this team and arguably maybe even better than he is now. So I don't think you should. But in terms of is he untouchable, I don't think so. I think if
Gretzky was traded,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly,
literally almost known as untouchable in certain aspects. But from an Anaheim perspective, I cannot see a scenario unless you are getting a similar goalie and something else.
But I think where it stems is an organization. Yeah, and not even that. I think it starts internally. There is if you're the Ducks right now. Analyze what you have, and it all depends what the organization thinks they have in the goaltenders behind them. What do you have, and what do you think you have in Lucas Dostal? I think that's where the question starts. Or what do you have in the other guys, Lyrics and Eck, or whoever else? Yeah. It definitely is, but that's I think where the conversation starts. And you say, well, do you think you have a potential starting goaltender in Lucas Dostal? If you say yes, then the return becomes maybe you bring in a goaltender. You don't aim for the high elite level goaltender, an NHL ready goaltender. You aim for maybe another working project that you can kind of couple with Dostal and at least have another replacement there. And then I think you look for other pieces, and they'd have to be elite pieces. And I think the only way Bob Murray would do this is if he got a deal that just blew him out of the water, where you can't say no. And one team, again, I got criticism on Twitter for this. I didn't say we should trade John Gibson. I said a team that would be interested and that has the assets to do it are the Carolina Hurricanes. And if you could even get Martin Necas or Jake Bean into that discussion, it's worth at least exploring that road. Now, again, I don't think you should, and unless you, and in my personal opinion, unless you're getting Martin Necas and Jake Bean back, I don't even think you entertain the discussion because it's not worth it at that point. I think anybody who is pursuing John Gibson should be prepared and willing to not only give up a first-round pick, but either their number 1 or number 2 prospect. That's where the conversation starts for me. But I don't see them doing it. I don't see it being impossible at the same time, though.
Yeah, I just think from a goalie perspective, if from a Ducks goalie perspective, you can't bank on the fact that these younger goalies, as great as they are, playing in international competition or overseas, that's going to necessarily translate. And it's tough to get there, and sometimes goalies take, like Bennington takes at least 25 before he actually shows he's capable of it, and a whole lot of things had to go wrong for him to even get that shot, to even make it and then become what he is. But that's just such a diamond in the rough type of deal. And so I would think there is more value or more reward and way less risk if you keep Gibson and you can trade Ryan Miller, who's has shown he's more than a capable backup. He is a career goalie. He knows the score. He can help any team out. He can even take over a starting job under the right circumstances. I think it just makes way more sense from a Ducks perspective to go, hey, I'll give you this and give me, a prospect or, a high enough draft pick that, makes worthwhile. Yeah, it's not the greatest value compared to a Gibson, but it makes way more sense on the Ducks. And I just can't see them really ever entertaining another thing unless they're getting a goalie that is going to be here and now to help this team. Otherwise, they are, like I said, if Getzlaf or Gibson are traded, that's a riot. I mean, no one's putting up with that. I don't care necessarily what they get back unless it's someone that is on level with what we're giving up.
Yeah. Now,
or just slightly under with a good prospect and draft pick.
Exactly. Joseph Holmes said in their chat, he said, I'm just throwing this out there. No team wins a cup when your goalie is your most talented player. Recently, I would agree. I think the last time that's happened is probably the 2003 New Jersey Devils. You could argue Bennington maybe, because there was no stars on that St. Louis Blues teams, but guys like
But then again, O'Reilly's the one who got the consignment.
I'm thinking, and I'd have to go through, but just off the top of my head, the last team to probably do that was the 03 Devils. you guys like I think it was Elias and Lang and Bruner and Niedermayer were on that team. Like these weren't and like those were their top players back. And Elias was a great player and Gomez was a great player, but Martin Brodeur was the star of that team. He was the guy. He was the
He didn't even win the Conn
most
Smythe.
talented player. But it's hard. It's hard to. But
Well,
I think
it depends. It depends. If he's your best player, like overall throughout like the entire season, then I can see Martin Brodeur.
The most talented player on the 03
player.
team. It would hard pressed to say it wasn't Martin Brodeur. I mean, the guy, I would bet money that guy probably started 70+ games in the regular season.
That was Jeff Friesen. Jeff Friesen was the best guy.
Jeff Friesen was he on that team?
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, I think he scored. Yeah, I think he scored at least one goal in that game 7. So,
I mean, they had a great team, but I would argue, and again, I think Joseph is right in the terms of recently, at least the last decade, the goalie was the most talented player on their team. It may be top 3 or top 4. But like I think Jonathan Quick was a top 3 or top 4 player on the Kings, but it wasn't Jonathan Quick who only won them that cup. He wasn't their most talented player per se. I think he won a Conn Smythe, but he wasn't. Kopitar, I would argue, is their most talented player, and the Doughty's right up there as well.
Yeah, it depends because you can still have good players, and then you can have just an elite goalie, and make that work. So yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, it's tough because I mean, tough. Like all that
comes down to like a personal opinion on most of these too. Like, if you want to use Conn Smythe as the kind of the be all end all, then I think there was definitely goalies who won Conn Smythe over the last decade. I know for sure Jonathan Quick was one of them. I can't remember if Corey Crawford won one as well. But there were definitely guys.
I think Duncan keep tapes.
Yeah, there were definitely guys who won it. Let's move on here though, because we're kind of rambling a bit. We're getting on here. I guess we can move into not a pure NHL question before we get to the fan question, but one I want to bring up because it's a hot topic. I just want to ask you this question. I don't know if you saw this. I don't follow baseball too much, but it's been big in the news. So the Houston Astros, they ended up being proved that they were cheating in the 2017 World Series by stealing signs.
Signs,
yeah. So they got a massive punishment laid down where their general manager and their manager, so their coach, were suspended and then fired by the team. $5 million fine, and they lost their draft picks for their first and second round draft picks for 2020 and 2021. Did not have the title stripped away. If that was to happen in the NHL, would you suspect that the team, or would you expect the team to have the trophy stripped away, and would you want that to happen? Do you think it merits having the trophy stripped away?
That's really a college thing, is what I've noticed. They take it away and say there's no winner in this one.
Are the two places that happens.
I can't imagine. I'm trying to think of a way that NHL teams would cheat. Well, I mean, I guess they could F with the locker room or F with the gear.
Let's just say they found a way, and this type of punishment was laid down. Doesn't matter the team, whatever personal biases aside. Would you think, even if you want to answer the question about the Astros, do you think if a team is caught cheating like that and it's proven that they aided their way to win a trophy,
no one's gonna remember that.
But I guess you could do it, but it's
symbolic. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it obviously can't be the only thing. Obviously, taking draft picks away, serious fines. I mean, something that hampers the team moving forward because, the team either employed him or the team knew about it, and that was the sort of deal.
If you're a fan,
you can do it. It's somewhat just a symbolic thing because everyone's going to look back and go like, oh yeah, they won it that year. And then no one's really going to remember that they cheated once you get a few years down the road.
Let's make this personal. If it came out that the 2007 Ducks were cheating and they stripped the trophy, would you care? I wouldn't care. And we still watched it. We all enjoyed it. We all celebrated them winning. That doesn't change if it
cheaters,
right? But it doesn't. It wouldn't change anything.
No,
I don't
all
think,
it does is just give trolls on
Right.
social media. So yeah, I mean that's it. So other
maybe you
than
feel a
that,
bit weird about it, but it doesn't change everything that happened in that moment. I think it more becomes a thing for the history books, and later down the road, people who didn't experience it, maybe that becomes a thing, or just people on the outside looking in where that becomes a thing. But I really don't think, at least for the fans that experience that were there for that, I don't think it matters. It doesn't change it. I mean, it comes down to, like, if the price of winning a championship is, forfeiting your draft picks for 2 years, a $5 million fine to a billionaire owner, and having your coach and your GM fired, would you do that now to have the Ducks win the Stanley Cup this year? You could argue that it's not that much of a punishment as a fan, right?
So it's not too tough.
As a fan, like, if you had to,
as a fan, you kind of go like,
right? Like, the ultimate goal is to win the Stanley Cup,
disappointed in
right?
my team, but
if you didn't know they were cheating, and
wouldn't lessen your experience.
Side thing here, if to win a championship, it cost you Dallas Eakins, Bob Murray, and your first round and second round picks in this year's draft and next year's draft, and then a $5 million fine to the Samuel Elliott, which doesn't hurt us. I mean, that's not a big price to pay for winning it all, right? Like, it really isn't, because normally those draft picks are to help you win it all, and if you won it all anyway, it's not the end of the world. You probably traded some of those draft picks to get to that point anyway. So,
as a fan, you just have to listen to the BS about it. But you listen to BS every way to Sunday anyways, whether it's cheating or not or whatever. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, everyone had to watch your team win it. Whether that cheating comes down the road and it gets revealed, everyone just still has to feel like I lost.
If they stripped that 2017 title from the Astros and give it to the Dodgers, that Dodgers fans are going to start celebrating like they won the World Series.
We won the World Series.
Like, you never were there. It never happened. You never saw it happen. The players didn't celebrate. You didn't get to experience that whole thing. Like, it would just be a pity party at that point. Be like, yay, we won, but we didn't really win. We just got it given to us.
And short of it being like cheating on the play that ended, created the championship, if it's like they stole signs, or like, I mean, there's still 7 games that are going on in most of these series
that happen. And in baseball, it's a big thing, because you're letting the pitcher know what pitch is coming. It's a big advantage, and I get it. But there's other things that happen, and the player still has to hit it, and you still have to make other plays defensively.
I guess what we're saying here for Hermione is cheat away, because it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, cheat away, because the cost is worth it.
It's worth it.
Championship. All right, let's get into questions, because we had a few, and we're running a bit long here. Joseph asked us this question after the last show, and I want to bring it up here because it's a really interesting question. It never really crossed my mind. He said, Troy Terry is a right shot pass first player. He's a possession monster. It's hard to get him off the puck, and we all know he can win battles despite the lack of size and experience. So the question he has is, could the Ducks pull a card from the Minnesota Wild playbook with Brent Burns and make Troy Terry a defenseman? Obviously, he won't be a stay-at-home, but what would be wrong with him holding the point on a 1-3-1 power play?
I cannot see him be a defenseman on 5-on-5. That makes it's too tough for me to see that happen, because he's got almost. I mean, maybe if he gets bigger. Brent Burns is big. They did this with Dustin Byfuglien as well. I mean, he was a winger and then went back on defense.
Right,
but those are big boys.
We're talking modern NHL now, right? Where guys like Cale Makar.
But he's even thinner and lighter than that. I don't think if he's asked to defend, can he defend? Yeah. Does he know how to defend? Does he know where he needs to move?
That's the thing, right? Like, all these, and I think with these guys, like, the difference between Byfuglien and Brent Burns is I believe they had played D at some point, and they were those guys.
They're not bad defensemen.
No, they were guys
with an offensive flair.
I think they were guys who were on D and were moved up to right wing and then got put back to D. That's, if I remember correctly, I think Burns and Byfuglien were drafted as defensemen. Their teams moved them up onto the wing, because the NHL went through this period where they started moving like offensive defensemen up to the wing to see if that would help. And then ultimately they got moved back to defense. I don't think you really ever see the transition from winger to defenseman. It almost usually is the opposite way around, where you get defenseman to winger. We're seeing it with Brendan Smith this year with the Rangers, who moved up from defense to play fourth line left wing. Brandon Montour's played forward a bit with the Sabres this year. I believe there's another defenseman. I can't remember the team, but that there's also, I think it's Pistrick with the Buffalo Sabres, who's also moved up and played. Has played on the wing, so you could see it, and in terms of size, like Cale Makar is 5'11", 187. Terry's 6', 180. Like I don't think size is the issue. I just think this is a guy who's probably played wing his entire career, and then trying to move him to defense, like you said, can he play defense?
Learn defense. It's not that easy. Defensemen already take a little bit longer usually to mature and figure out the position, because you have to learn so many intricacies of that. Now, Troy Terry may be able to hold the puck when he's entering the offensive zone and keep it away from defenders, but he's also making defenders kind of chase him and trying to find soft areas. When he's a defenseman, that's not what he's doing. He's going to have to try and move forward. Yeah, he might be able to make a move, but I just see the other side of it is like, well, now what happens the other half of the time for the Ducks, or more than half of the time, where he's back there defending, he's spinning around. Yeah. I guess like Cam Fowler does sometimes.
Well, if you've never done it, like that type of switch from forward to D is way different from D to forward.
It's too tough.
Everything that goes, and honestly, like a lot of guys who play D, you ask them, back in junior or in midget or whatever, they played forward. Like,
yeah,
they played
everyone wants to score goals at one point. No one goes like, "Hey, I just want to hang back here for a while."
Everybody usually starts out as a forward, and then they get moved back to defense, and for whatever reason. And listen, I like the idea. I like the creativity to think that way. And I'm not saying it would never work. I don't think because of his size it wouldn't work. It would all depend on Troy Terry. If he's ever played defense before, if he could make the positioning and make that change. I don't think it's an option. I don't remember the last time I saw a player go from forward to D. I don't think I've ever seen that type of transition.
What I do like about just his question posed is I don't necessarily hate him maybe running the point. I wouldn't do it on the top line, however. The one problem I do have is that I don't really trust his ability to make those passes under pressure. So if he's up at the point and he's the last guy back, I can see mistakes happening, bobbles happening, and it's going the other way. And, as young as he is, he's still not like, the super speedy guy to try and catch up to everything. I feel like maybe under that pressure, I'd have to see him do it, but
I can't see it even on the power play like that. Like I would be more apt to say I could see him being a 5-on-5 defenseman than working on a 1-3-1 power play at the point. I mean, he has the playmaking ability for sure. I just think he's more suited to be that behind the net or from the circles passer than he is.
Because he doesn't have an overpowering slap shot, so he's not really a threat.
Or even
if
a
he's
hard
at
wrist
that
shot.
top. Yeah. So, I mean, he kind of picks his spots, but he's more of that playmaker that's going to try and find somebody else, or, hopefully he's open and can, quick release. He's got a quick release, but you can have a quick release, but if you're that far away from the goalie, it's going to be a CNI shot to get through, and literally you can kind of put anyone there and hope to get a CNI shot. So if there's no other talent back there, then it's a little rough. I was just trying to find some way that might work for Terry to be
we've seen him on the right circle, and I think he's worked best there. And just to even get down more into like the nitty gritty of why I don't think it works. Like I don't think his lateral skating is good enough to also work. Like that's a huge part of manning a 1-3-1 power play in the blue line. You've got to be able to skate that blue line laterally so cleanly to be able to make those passes and get the passes off on your forehand or backhand. Like you are the quarterback in that play. Like we talk about power play quarterbacks in a 2-2-1 type formation or 2-1-2 type formation, and it's a bit different than being in that 1-3-1 because you're the guy. You're the only guy back there.
That's it. Yeah.
Every pass that goes back to the blue line goes to you. You've got to skate across that blue line, kind of be like a roaming guy in the center of that ice, and everything really facilitates from you. Guys we've seen it do well this year, and other teams like Rasmus Dahlin and Cale Makar, and like these are elite guys that usually get this done. And I'd be more apt to say that Hampus Lindholm or Cam Fowler would be a guy you would want to try there or use more often than throwing Troy Terry up there. Maybe you take a flyer and you see how it works, but I don't see it being.
I would maybe wait on it. I'd have to see more from Terry and his development before I'm willing to put him back there. Definitely not this season, and unless something drastically changes, I really wouldn't see it next season either.
All right, let's get into the last couple questions. I know we've kind of got a hard out soon here that we got to get to, but we actually had some questions come in on Twitter. So Kent said, how stupid is Vegas? Talk about an overreaction. First time the franchise isn't living in a fairy tale and they fire the coach. Quick thoughts, dumb decision, I think, personally, on firing him. 2 points out of top of the Pacific Division.
Yeah, I have no idea, and the reasoning behind it was what I had a feeling it wasn't a good fit. His team had a Cinderella story, almost wins the Stanley Cup as an expansion team. Insanity. My opinion, robbed the very next playoffs, and I think they should have gone much further in that one. And then a little bit of a bump in the road with the new personnel trying to bring in some players and trying to make it mesh and work. And you're still in a good spot to make a playoff run. Fleury's been down and out for quite some time too, in and out of the lineup, and they struggled on defense a little bit. But they've been moving in and out so many people here and there. Your Tatars come in and then they're gone, and then you bring in they've gotten Stone, but they add in a Pacioretty. It's just different pieces trying to make it all work. And to fire the coach over just a little bump where they're not the top echelon team, it blows me away. I mean, calm down. It takes teams usually a very long time after they get their first coach to finally fire him. Yeah. I mean, Barry Trotz was forever, and that team barely did anything. I mean, even the Ducks, it wasn't until for a while until after Ron Wilson. We were god awful horrible forever until that, and then we fired him. So you got time. You don't have to fire him, and then to fire him for the coach that's doing worse. Or was doing worse on the worst team in your division. It's like this guy's got
already
the answers.
Fired this year or no? Was he?
Yeah, was he on? He was on San Jose.
He got fired by San Jose for them doing bad, and then you bring him in. Like I don't get it. They're 24-19-6. They're 2 points out of, or 3 points out from where Arizona is in the top of the standings with no games, like the same amount of games played. Like, yeah, maybe they're underperforming in the sense we thought they'd be higher, but they're literally, like I said, they're 4 points away from being second in the Western Conference. That's how wide open the West is this year. Like, they have the talent to make the playoffs. They probably still would have made the playoffs. Like, what advantage are you getting of Pete DeBoer, who's proven nothing in the playoffs, when you have a coach who took you to the Stanley Cup Finals in your first year, and like you said, got kind of robbed with some calls that led to
San Jose
being exited out by San Jose. And I'm pretty sure Gerard Gallant called threw some names at Pete DeBoer in that playoff series, and you're bringing in I know Ryan Reeves and Pete DeBoer were chirping in the playoffs too. Like, that's the weirdest fire and hire I've seen in a long time. I'm sure they had a cab waiting for Gerard Gallant.
I know, that poor dude. He gets fired in the weirdest ways, man. I don't get it.
Quick other questions we had. We talked about this, but Victor asked if Gibson was retraded, what could he be traded for? Carolina has mentioned needing a goalie. Would the Ducks possibly get Kochetkov in return, who's a goalie the Hurricanes drafted in the second round last year? We talked about this a bit in terms of getting that goaltender in return. Bob Murray, I don't think, would ever bank on a Russian goaltender in the KHL. You have no idea when he's going to come over. Probably wouldn't come over until he's about 23, 24 like they all do. So I would say that's a no. If he was to be traded, I think Carolina is definitely a destination, and it would have to be a top prospect and a first-round pick to be even considered in discussion.
I would think it'd have to be even higher. I don't even care who their prospect is.
It's
and
one
the
down
first round's got
for a guy who is like third.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it much of a down year. I think if this team was anywhere competitive, or they had enough of the players, we're banking on young players, that his numbers are a little bit higher. This defense has been atrocious, and I can't see selling stock on it. So I don't really see anything that Carolina would give us unless they said, here's our first, here's another first, here's that prospect, here's this other top prospect. I mean, unless they are just getting rid of the farm to grab him. That's the only way I can see it, and I just don't even see it working out in any way. That's my possibility.
Adam asked if the Ducks don't land the top draft pick, so getting Alexis Lafreniere, I would say also Byfield. Who should they take?
This is an egg question.
Yeah. Now, and I'll rephrase it so you can answer it too. I think they should take Alex Holtz. I think the best pure goal scorer. We just talked to Scott Wheeler in an interview too, and he also reiterated that Alex Holtz is probably the best pure goal scorer of this draft. I think that is maybe not the number one need for the Ducks, but definitely the number two need for the Ducks, especially when you have, as Corey Pronman ranked him just earlier today, the number one prospect of all NHL teams right now is Trevor Zegras, and he is the best player, best creative player, best playmaker outside the NHL in Corey Pronman's words right now. Getting a pure goal scorer to go along with that, I think is ideal, and I think you can get a right shot defenseman, maybe not like Jamie Drysdale, but potentially like Jamie Drysdale in next year's draft if the Ducks aren't good, or somewhere else down the road, or bank on one with another late first or a second round pick if the Ducks can pick any other picks up here. But to rephrase this question from you, if the Ducks don't land the top draft pick, do you think they should take a forward, or do you think they should take a defenseman?
Forward. And like you said, with Zegras coming up and it really impressed me watching the whole World Juniors. So, but he would need somebody that's going to finish that. And then if that can create offense, our defense doesn't necessarily have to be so perfect, and so we're not going to screw up, and then all of a sudden we're running into our goalie and no one's picking up the puck in our feet. That angst is a little bit gone, and I think you can make mistakes because you got somebody that's going to put in the puck in the net. We have not had lethal goal scoring since the days of Corey Perry. I mean, it's been that long, it feels like. So
it definitely has. Quick round of questions from Instagram. Just a yes/no question here. Any chance the NHL allows Anaheim to get the number one pick? That's from Maverick. Or Bettman. He put Bettman in quotation marks. I don't subscribe to that theory that the draft lottery is rigged. I know everybody who hates the Oilers thinks that Canadian teams get the benefit of the doubt here.
Original six.
Or original six. Like any team could win it, and as long as it's not a bottom feeder small market team, there will be an argument made. New Jersey won it. People are like, oh, they want New Jersey to be good again. Like, there's no way the NHL of Bettman wanted the New Jersey Devils to win 2 first-round picks. Like, nobody wants to go to New Jersey. Like, they are, yes, a historic franchise from the Brodeur era, but, like, nobody wanted... The NHL definitely would not want them to go to New Jersey over the Rangers or over... the Leafs or the Canadiens.
Market,
and if Alexis Lafreniere goes to the Montreal Canadiens with the draft in Montreal this year, that will just fuel that conspiracy theory like crazy. Anyway, next question. Will Deslauriers be around next year?
I hope so.
I think no, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think Bob Murray likes him, and I think Dallas Eakins likes him as a player because he continues to play him. Clearly, they like having that guy in the lineup. I think there's a place for guys like that. I just think they need to be more than just that guy. You look at like Zach Kassian in the news right now. Yes, he's playing with Connor McDavid, but he does more than just be a physical guy who can fight. He's got 13 goals on the season. Like, I think if you're going to have a guy like that, you need him to do more.
Yeah, well, once again, he's I beg to differ. Or like, I'd want to know, well, how many of those were on a line with either McJesus or Draisaitl? And if it's an abundant amount of goals, like it's 10 out of 13, then I think we know where that goal scoring is happening. Deslauriers is a fourth-line guy. He's going to provide energy. He keeps, it's going to sound cliche, but once again, he's going to keep other teams honest, and we don't want Getzlaf fighting. We don't want that happening. Nick Ritchie, we don't want defensemen fighting. Deslauriers will fight. He leads the league in fighting. It gives us at least a little bit of, an edge to us But when I watch him play, he's hustling, he's working, he's doing everything you'd want a fourth line player to be. No, he's not going to be a third, second, or first line and put up an amazing amount of goals, but he's going to do a fourth line role, and he does it really well. So he's doing exactly what I would want a fourth line guy to do. Take him out, put somebody else in who might have a little bit more offensive talent, but maybe not the drive, the size, or the tenacity, or the physical aspect to it. And I think the Ducks would become a lesser team for it. So unless you find someone that can match it and
that's what I was
excel
going to say.
On the offense.
If you can find a guy who can do both, then sure. But I think there is still sort of a place for what Delorier brings. I don't think he's just a fighter.
I don't think
it's
a detriment. I don't think he brings the Ducks down.
No, I think he, like you said, I think he's hustled, and I think he's been a competitor, and you know, he's not an offensive guy, but I think what he brings to the game is not a detriment to the Ducks. It's not like he's turning over the puck every second he gets it. Like, he is still playing decent, and that's all you can expect from that guy. I mean, if he's going to do that and they want to bring that back next year, I'm not going to hate it. Obviously, if it's more than a 1-year deal, then maybe I'll be a little bit more skeptical of it, but I think you'd have to weigh it up with who's available come the time we make that decision in free agency. Last question from Shredden. He said, out of the kids, Comtois, Terry, Lindstrom, and Jones, include Steele in that too, which one would be the best as a trade piece?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Definitely not Jones.
For me, it's Sam Steele.
Sam Steele. Troy Terry's name, I think, carries a lot of weight, even though his production hasn't necessarily done it. But that's also Sam Steele's a bigger piece for the Ducks moving forward than I think Troy Terry would be. And I think Troy Terry, given the right circumstance, the right area, could probably do a little bit better on another team. So I would think they'd maybe want to see someone like him. But Sam Steele's a good center, young center.
I think it's like who'd have the most value as a trade piece.
I think they're pretty close between Terry and Sam Steele. You could edge it one way or the other, just depending on what teams are looking for. That's what I think. I guess
centers, like centers for me, it's like teams are always looking for centers, guys who can do what Sam Steele does with the offensive ability he has, and the fact that he's turned into such a good two-way player. He's at the top of that list for me. I think then I'm tied with Comtois and Lindstrom right after that. Comtois just because he's the younger player and he's actually produced at a better rate than Terry and Jones have. Lindstrom also, again, being the center. And then I got Terry and Jones right there. I've actually got them tied because I think, Terry's the more offensive guy, and I think he has better ability when it comes to that. But teams are always looking for a guy like Max Jones, a guy who has that ability, but, man, he plays with an edge, and he has speed, and he has that proven ability. He can score goals. Like, teams will always look for guys like that.
Think of a Matthew Tkachuk light. Not quite as big of an a-hole. Speaking of casting, not quite as big of an a-hole.
Light.
Yeah, but I mean that's a mind getting in there and doing that. But he's not really an agitator, and I think he tries hard, and I think he's got the talent. Just waiting for it to all click still.
All right. Well, that is it for the show. We went, of course, because every time me and Jason do a show, we went way over an hour.
Chatty Cathy's.
On an hour and 20. No Pat here to cut us off and kind of cut us down to an hour, which is fine. I mean, we'll have Pat hopefully on the next show. Next regular show, I believe, is scheduled for January 19th. Which is Sunday, I think. I don't know. January 19th.
This Sunday, right?
So that's the next regular show. We've got the rant show for all of our Patreon members scheduled for January 22nd, which I believe is a Wednesday or Tuesday. Either way, January 22nd. Pucks and Brews, again, for our Patreon members is scheduled for January 28th at this point. And then the next regular show, after the 19th, because the Ducks have their 5 to 7 day break there, is scheduled for the end of January, January 30th. So there is like an 11-day gap in between there. We're hoping to have an interview, at least one, maybe two, to kind of roll out over that period, so you guys aren't completely devoid of content. But like I said, if you are looking for extra content and you do want to support the show in that period of, obviously in that gap period, but for further on both past that, we do have our Patreon where we do post 2 bonus episodes a month. Like I said, the Rant Show and the Pucks and Brews Show. So if you are looking for extra content over that period and further beyond that, make sure you check us out at patreon.com/puckguysforevermighty. Anything else you want to throw in there, Jay?
Just one last thing. Yeah, we just confirmed that we're going to be at a watch party that will be in Anaheim Hills. It's off of Santa Ana Canyon, and it's going to be Pepperoni's or Pep's Pepperoni Pizza Place. It's a new venue for us, but I've met with the owner before. Real nice guy. We're going to get a nice little setup and also going to get happy hour pricing on everything. So this will be a much less expensive outing, but it's going to be for Saturday, February 1st, Ducks versus Kings. It's a 7:30 game. So we'd love to have everyone come out. We already seem like we're going to get 30, 35 already, and the more the merrier. Just come on out, and it's always a good time. Hang out, meet me and Pat. Ed won't be there unless Pat feels like flying him out again. And other than that, we always have a great time meeting everybody. He'll buy you a beer every now and again. So come on out, meet everybody else who's a Ducks fan, a Forever Mighty fan, and enjoy the game. Watch the 2 worst Southern California teams. Well,
Battle for Lafreniere.
Yeah, right.
And the most important thing, no trains. That's the most important thing.
Yes. Yeah.
That goes on deaf ears for a lot of people. But if you, if I think it was 2 watch parties ago, the last one I was at, so last year, there was we were at a venue.
I was a Kings one too.
It turned out, it was Ducks vs Kings. Turned out there was a train that was right behind literally 10 feet away from the venue we were at, and it decided to go for the entire night. Past what time we thought the train
specifically in overtime.
Yep. So that I think also the screen we were watching unfolded up a couple times. So hey, this one will be better. Just know that.
Yes.
Exactly.
Sure.
All right. So like I said, we'll be back on the 19th. Thanks for coming out, guys, and we'll see you then.
Bye, guys.